अस्सलाम वालेकुम सामीन, वॉइस ऑफ अमेरिका से प्रोग्राम इन द न्यूज़ के साथ मैं हूं आपका मेज़बान असद हसन। प्रोड्यूसर हैं सादी असद, जबकि हमारे साथ इंजीनियर है मिस्टर ज़ुहैर निक। आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम जिन मौज़ूआत पे बात करेंगे, सबसे पहले पाकिस्तान की हुकूमत और तहरीक तालिबान के दरमियान मुज़ाकरात। पाकिस्तान के मकामी ज़राए इब्लाग ये बता रही हैं कि तहरीक तालिबान पाकिस्तान ने जो कमेटी नॉमिनेट की थी हुकूमत के साथ मुज़ाकरात के लिए, उनमें से उसके 2 नुमाइंदा अफराद इस वक्त तालिबान की शूरा के साथ मुलाकात के लिए शुमाली वज़ीरिस्तान पहुँचे हैं। हुकूमत ने उन्हें इस सिलसिले में फैसिलिटेट किया है। ट्रांसपोर्टेशन और दीगर लॉजिस्टिक्स के एतबार से देखना यह है कि ये तालिबान के साथ जो मुज़ाकरात हैं ये किस समत आगे बढ़ रही हैं, कितनी तवक्कुआत अब रखी जा सकती हैं, क्या सूरत हाल कुछ वाज़ेह होना शुरू हुई है या नहीं है, और क्या जो बुनियादी इख्तलाफात थे उससे आगे निकल चुकी हैं दोनों पार्टियां, दोनों फरीक। और हमने इसी मौजू पे बात की है वेंडा फेल्बब-ब्राउन से। ये एक्सपर्ट हैं ब्रुकिंग इंस्टीट्यूट के साथ, वाशिंगटन बेस्ड ये थिंक टैंक है। वेंडा फेल्बब-ब्राउन, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर जॉइनिंग वॉइस ऑफ अमेरिका। As you know, Pakistani government is in the process of peace dialogue with the TTP, means Pakistan Taliban movement. How do you see this engagement?
Well, the current round of negotiations needs to be understood in the context of several previous rounds of negotiations that either produced no agreement or, in fact, produced an agreement that was very favorable to Pakistani extremist groups like the TTP, essentially yielded power to them only for the groups to both abuse the population and ultimately violate the terms and continue attacks in Pakistan. So, frankly, I am not very optimistic about this round of negotiations. Even if they do, in fact, result in an agreement, one is to ask oneself, why should the outcome of the agreement be this time different than the previous? Already the Taliban has stated that its goals are control over territories such as North Waziristan, that it wants the military to depart from these areas. Obviously, it will want to institute a harsh interpretation of Sharia. All the many reasons that are problematic but consistent, highly problematic but consistent with this agenda. The other point I would raise is, does the negotiation in fact generate sufficient political cover for Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and for the Pakistani military to start battling the insurgents in a more vigorous manner?
Mm-hmm. But the advocates of peace process with Taliban Tehreek, they strongly believe that Pakistan is in war from last 10 years and it seems to be an endless game. So what is the other alternative if there is no peace talk?
Well, indeed. And so I think the trade-off that's being proposed is the following. Since the military has really been unable to mount sufficient will and resources to defeat the TTP, is it preferable to cede control to the TTP and, in fact, allow them to rule the territories? One only has to look to what happened in Swat, where not only the abuses against the population and the violations of the deal were extensive, but the militants only use that territory to strengthen themselves further and start attacking beyond Swat. And my belief is that if the Taliban gets a deal where they can control territory from where the military has departed, that they will not be satisfied and they'll be the first ones to violate the deal.
Vanda, if we, by your calculation that Pakistani military is not applying the maximum resources to deal with the Taliban, but on the other side in Afghanistan, United States-led international forces, they are assumably applying the maximum forces, maximum resources, but still the state of war is same. So what is the difference if Pakistani deal with the TTP, Pakistani Taliban, and United States deal with Afghan Taliban? So don't you think Pakistan is following America?
You are right that the war in Afghanistan is also stalemated, and although ISAF forces managed to reverse the Taliban momentum of 2008, 2009, they clearly did not defeat and eliminate the Taliban. I think there are many reasons to that. One is the difficulties in fighting an insurgency campaign, the same ones that the Pakistani military faces. The other is the deep deficiency of the Karzai government and the poor state of governance that is alienating so many Afghans from the political system. And the third one that ISAF commanders and ISAF analysts frequently point to is, of course, the ability of the Afghan Taliban to enjoy safe havens in Pakistan. This involves both the top leadership that is probably under some form of house protection or house arrest, depending on one's perspective in Pakistan. But it also involves, of course, the ability of Taliban groups like the Haqqanis to go into Pakistan and enjoy safe havens in Pakistan.
And many Pakistani Taliban have safe havens in Afghanistan. Even the TTP head Fazlullah is based in Afghanistan right now.
Indeed. And the Pakistani military has been equally frustrated that ISAF forces have been not able to prevent those safe havens. However, I think there is very much of a sense of a real difference in effort with the Pakistani military repeatedly promising over the years that it would launch a major military campaign in North Waziristan to tackle the TTP there and to shut down safe havens, never undertaking that campaign, that the amount of resources and resolve is not where it could be. And in fact, that in the case of the Afghan Taliban, the ISI, for example, provides assistance, advice, protection, even physical resources to the Taliban. Now, interestingly, of course, the Afghan government very much frustrated and angry with Pakistan over the protection and lack of resolve to fight the Afghan Taliban. Has been entertaining its own notions of providing safe havens to the TTP, to very problematic bloody commanders like Latif Masood.
Ms. Brown, if we see there is an approach of maintaining the status quo in terms of no major offensive from Taliban, no major offensive from Pakistan's military, is it an acceptable option for the international stakeholders, including United States?
Well, yes. I mean, what is the status quo? The status quo is
no deal, but no major offensive from any side, neither from military.
Right. I was about to elaborate. Absolutely. You know, what is actually happening on the ground? What is the status quo? Well, the status quo is sort of periodic actions by the Pakistani military against some aspects of TTP and militant groups, such as sporadic bombing. A rather intense and pervasive campaign by the TTP well beyond the areas of North Waziristan and some of the border Pashtunkhwa areas and Fatah areas. And on the other side, the still entrenched Afghan Taliban certainly continuing in campaign and having launched a very intense campaign last year. So the status quo is problematic for both countries. In Pakistan, it's causing tremendous civilian casualties. It is bringing violence increasingly to places like Karachi. And it frustrates the United States because there is sense that there are safe havens for Afghan Taliban. On the Pakistani side, on the Afghan side, the full-fledged insurgency war is still persisting. So the status quo is deeply suboptimal for anyone except for the two militant groups.
When is it possible I can ask your opinion on the latest United Nations report that highlights that year was the deadliest year in Afghanistan in terms of civilian killings?
Well, it was the deadliest year since 2001. The number of civilian casualties in 2001 were higher.
Yes. So don't you think this is a worrying for Afghan, this is worrying for United States-led military forces in Afghanistan?
Absolutely, and it needs to be worrying for the government of Afghanistan. It's obviously awful for the people of Afghanistan, and it is also deeply disturbing for ISAF forces, neither of which want to see an escalation of fighting, and particularly escalation of civilian casualties. Now, it is clear from the report and beyond the report that the Taliban is responsible for the vast majority of the killings. 74% of the civilian casualties are caused by the Taliban, 3% by ISAF, 8% by Afghan security forces. That's a significant rise, as Afghan security forces have taken much greater activity in the war, and ISAF is increasingly engaged in only limited actions. And the rest of the killings have not been attributed to one, could not be attributed to one side or another. But it's a very serious matter, and I expect that this year will be at least equally bloody, with the Afghan Taliban trying to launch a very intense campaign and being very indifferent to civilian casualties.
Vanda Felbab-Brown, thank you very much for joining us. You are with Brooking Institute, a Washington-based think tank. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for bringing me on the show.
Thanks.